Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This week on the show, we are delving into the challenges faced by young families in BC. We're calling it Baby Bumps and Road Humps. We'll talk about climate change, connecting with culture, mental health, and today, housing. How is the province's housing crisis affecting young families? Has it affected your search for a home for you and your kids? Have you delayed starting a family due to high housing costs? We'd love to hear from you on the open line. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And this hour, we are asking you, how is the housing crisis affecting young families in BC? What home have you been able to find to raise your family? Or have you delayed starting a family due to high housing costs? What do you think are the solutions? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, the BC government has made housing a key priority with a stream of announcements, including housing targets for 10 municipalities. It's ordered 10 of the largest municipalities in the province to build more than 60,000 new units of housing over the next 5 years, or risk the province stepping in to intervene. Those municipalities are, once again, Vancouver, Victoria, Kamloops, Abbotsford, Delta, Saanich, North Vancouver District, Port Moody, Oak Bay, and West Vancouver. And in the last 2 weeks, BC announced limits on short-term rentals, allowing them on only primary residence properties. Here's Housing Minister Ravi talking about his priorities just after accepting the Housing Ministry portfolio.
And so part of the work I'll be doing is working with them on that. My three priorities for me in this role will be speed, supply, and synergy. So ensuring that we get things done faster, ensuring that we're able to bring on the supply that we critically need, and ensuring that we have synergy and we're working together with all the stakeholders and local government officials are part of that.
Super fast. Next question. Dirk Meissner, Canadian Press.
Hey, Minister. The previous minister, or the premier now, in the past said he was going to change permitting laws, really make municipal governments feel that they've got to get things done. How do you feel about doing something like that?
Well, we need to do more, and I think there's an understanding that all levels of government, the province included and federal government, need to do more. This is a generational question, this housing question. Premier's made it one of his top priorities. He's made it clear to me that he's been moving at an aggressive pace, and I need to move at that pace with him. So I'll be meeting with local governments very soon to talk about how we can address these challenges together, do it in a cooperative way. And of course, I think what I've learned through the pandemic is everyone wants to do the best they can for our communities, for our people, and I'm going to start my work with those kind of mentalities or that kind of framing in the work I have to do.
Speed, supply, and synergy, how do you take that to the room when you're talking to mayors? What should mayors think of that?
Well, I think most mayors understand that we have to get housing done faster. I mean, I read the reports. I've been spending a lot of time on economic recovery, and housing comes up every single time. We have, last year alone, 100,000 net people come to British Columbia. The first 2 quarters of this year, 72,000 people. Were breaking records, and that we need that for our economy, but we also need to ensure that we have the housing for not only the people here, but the people that we want to welcome to British Columbia.
That's Housing Minister Ravi. And yet, housing unaffordability continues to cause a crisis in British Columbia. And we're asking you, how is that crisis affecting young families in BC? What home have you been able to find to raise your family? Is it affordable? Have you even delayed starting a family due to those high housing costs? You can call us on the open line, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Kareem Kadus is an advisor and researcher with the group Generation Squeeze, and I spoke with him last week, asking him what housing struggles mean for outcomes for young families.
Nothing good, I'd say. This financial strain that we're putting on these families is going to have loads of adverse effects. You know, it puts more stress on the parents. It doesn't allow for the same sorts of opportunities for the kids because there's less disposable income now that's going instead to rent and mortgage payments that might have been going to extracurricular activities or just building more experience for the children. So all around, it's really weighing on people.
May I ask for yourself, is this something that has weighed on you personally?
Yeah, for sure. My wife and I actually were both in our early 30s, and we were just talking about this last night. We're thinking about, you know, trying to start a family on our own, of our own. And this is like something maybe not that was fully taken for granted by people in the past, but it wasn't the same sort of burden that it would be now in terms of financial, for one, like getting a big enough house. The house I grew up in, there's no way we could afford something like that. It's inconceivable. So it's definitely
Right.
weighing on me big time. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that, about your future?
There's, you know, stress. Yeah, it's a lot to think about and to figure out. You know, it doesn't. We've kind of turned our society into a place where, as I said earlier, I think in the conversation, hard work no longer pays off. So you can do as well as you want. You can become a doctor, a lawyer, and I know many people in these positions. And you can struggle and save up a down payment, hopefully fast enough before the market grows faster than you're saving. And where does that leave you? That leaves you, if you live in Toronto or Vancouver, with an $800,000 million mortgage that you're spending the next 30 years paying off. So there's not really any great options.
What are you calling for at Generation Squeeze?
We're calling for a number of things. We have a pretty comprehensive housing policy reform platform that we have on our website, and it goes through a number of things that we could do to start to improve the situation. One thing that's important for us at Generation Squeeze to note is that we didn't end up here by accident. We have policies that we put in place, maybe for good reason, a long time ago or years ago, and they're just no longer working. They've led us here. It didn't happen by accident. So we need to update these things to fix the situation.
Kareem, it's very good to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Michelle.
Kareem Kadus, he's with Generation Squeeze. And we are taking your calls, asking you, how has the housing crisis affected young families in BC? Have you been able to find a home you can afford? Let us know about that. Where are you living with your family? Have you perhaps moved outside Vancouver to another municipality to find something bigger? Have you delayed starting a family due to those high housing costs? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And email us too, bctoday@cbc.ca. I'll go to our calls in just a moment, but first let me introduce our guest who will be with me for the rest of this hour. Nathan Loster is an associate professor of sociology at the University of BC, and he's author of the book, The Death and Life of the Single Family House, Lessons from Vancouver on Building a Livable City. Nathan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, what are the challenges faced by young families?
So there are a lot. I mean, if you think about all of the different expected life transitions that people make, so many of these life transitions, whether or not it's leaving home, moving into a partner with a partner, having children, getting a good job, going to university. So many of these different life transitions are also housing transitions. So
Right.
anytime that you can't find that housing, it's really going to feel like this real disruption to what you expected your life to look like.
And has the vision or perception of what kind of home or house makes a home for a family, has that changed?
You know, I think it really has. I think there was, for a long time, a broad expectation that when you're ready to start a family, when you're ready to settle down and have children, that you would move into a single-family house
Right.
that you owned as well, right? And we can see that transforming, especially in the context like Metro Vancouver,
Sure.
where that's just been increasingly out of reach in the last few decades. But we have seen people adapting, right? So people have been willing to adapt and move in to a condo, move into a rental apartment, all kinds of different housing stock that we have available in Metro Vancouver. People have adapted and come up with new ways of forming families. But even those have increasingly shifted out of reach of people. And
It's the cost, even though they've adapted, the cost of it is still getting out of reach.
really prohibitive, yeah. So it's becoming really, really difficult. And as a result, we're seeing people delaying these transitions, people feeling stuck in place. Again, each of these transitions is also often a housing transition. So when you can't find any place to move to,
Right.
that housing shortage really hits home and affects people.
And you know, we've heard really a stream of announcements, right, from the province, the Homes for People Action Plan. The City of Vancouver touts the fact that it's approved a record number of units. Where do young families fit in that? You know, we hear about the missing middle, for example. So where do young families fit in that?
You know, it's a good question. I think that there's a lot of possible places they could fit. And one thing that I think is clear from my own research is that, you know, we need a lot of diverse housing options available for people. For a long time, all we were building was really single-family houses across North America. Recently, that's really shifted, and people are starting to adapt. But we need a big diversity of different types of housing for people. And ideally, that's what the province is moving towards, is trying to construct a lot more housing of a lot more different types. And that's part of what that missing middle, for instance, is aimed at, right, is trying to get those types, trying to get the diversity in those types that can really house families and provide different options for people.
18 minutes past 12 o'clock, past 1 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. You're listening to my guest, Nathan Loster, who's a UBC professor of sociology and author of the book, The Death and Life of the Single Family House, Lessons from Vancouver on Building a Livable City. And we are taking your calls on the open line, asking you, how has the housing crisis affected young families in BC? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And Corinna is up first from South Surrey. Hi, Corinna, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, so what's the impact that you're seeing?
Well, as a birth worker, I work in Wally at a nonprofit, and I support families, mostly Indigenous families, with their birthing process and with the wraparound cares and issues that come along with starting a family and being a pregnant person. And housing is the number one issue that all families are facing, but all of my families, and it's an incredibly dire situation. Families without housing, and if someone is being evicted for whatever reason, and they're pregnant, and the ability to find housing right now it's a crisis, as we all know. And then when you layer a number of factors that might discriminate against a family, such as the number of children or pets, or the fact that many people experience discrimination from being Indigenous, and housing can be that can be a make or break situation for a life giver, especially. And if they don't have housing, if anybody doesn't have housing available around the time that a baby is born, then that actually draws in the attention and the interference of the Ministry for Child and Family Development into the situation. And babies are removed, children can be removed in a housing situation, in a housing crisis like this. And it's trickled down to the fact where I'm even seeing, I've supported a family, and I know it's, you know, it's a sentiment that is out there around, you know, can I actually do this, or do I have to make a decision to terminate a pregnancy right now because the living situation is critical. So it's a heartbreaking situation, and I think it's more than just, do I get to own my own home or not? For some of us, it's, do my children get to reside with me? What is the state of my life going to look like from here on? It's terrifying.
It sounds like you hear some terrifying stories and you are involved and engaged with terrifying experiences of these families.
We only have so many resources to be able to support families, right? And to be a housing worker right now, I think there are courageous, open-hearted people that are doing almost an impossible job.
Well, what do you think would help? Is there more need for subsidized housing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the rest of the, like, what is needed, but
Yeah.
I do know that on the front line,
Yeah.
that housing is a huge issue, and the ripples are far-reaching. So I hope that 5 years sounds, oh, what a great plan, but 5 years is a really long time for someone who is pregnant immediately and looking at homelessness, and whether or not their baby stays in their care.
Where do you point people to, Corinna? I know you deal with such difficult cases.
Well, at the nonprofit that I work at, we have a housing department that is flooded. We look to all of the community resources. There are some new buildings coming up. We, you know, as soon as something becomes available, we tell all of our families, and then there's 400 applications for 64-bedroom units. And so, you know, we do the best that we can and keep our ears open and our ears to the ground, and try to be as creative as possible to make sure that everyone that we are coming in relationship with have the most support that we can give. But it's not enough, and it's actually, you know, hearing that as workers is heartbreaking as well.
You carry a lot, I can hear. And it sounds like it's hard to not know, you know, to have one unit become available and so much demand for it. You have a lot on your shoulders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a lot on our shoulders. And yeah, I think the government has a big job, and it can't happen fast enough.
Yeah. You've said it so poignantly, and you know, you get to a lot of other issues there around discrimination as well, all intersecting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Corinna, I'll let you go. I hope that you're okay after this call. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, really important call. Goes beyond life transitions. These are really difficult choices people are having to make, difficult situations. What about that? Supports. She said, yes, we do need more supportive housing. Is the province looking at that enough?
From my perspective, no. You know, I'd love to see a lot more housing. To me, this really does fall under diverse kinds of housing and diverse paths to get into that housing. Yeah. So we need a lot more supportive housing. We need a lot more different routes that people can get into housing, not just through the market. But we need a lot more market housing too, right? So more housing of all types right now. It really is kind of an all hands on deck situation. And oh God, I mean, yeah, Karina's is hit so many things right on the, you know, right on the head in terms of all the different ways that people are being impacted by this. And I think that's, you know, that issue of discrimination is really real, right? It's for all parents face this, right? When you have a child, I've carried out the audit studies to demonstrate that parents face this kind of rental discrimination. And then when you layer on top of that other marginalized statuses, being Indigenous can be really hard to get access to housing. So there's all kinds of ways that people are really being hit by this, and I think Karina's really working with some of the folks that are being hit the hardest by a lot of these situations. So yes, all kinds of more housing. Let's help Karina. Let's help the clients she's working with.
Let's take another call here. Anna is joining us now from Cloverdale. Hi, Anna. Thanks so much for calling in.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Sure. What's your experience?
So I'm a Surrey resident, and I'm 36 years old, and my spouse and I felt like we did all the right things. I went to university, we got, decent jobs and paid off our debt, and it's just a little disconcerting that that dream you had is kind of no longer there, and it's impacting our choice, like, do we
Excuse me.
afford this? We're constantly scared of getting kicked out of our rental because we don't know if we could afford to get into another one.
Oh.
And personally, that doesn't make me keen on starting a family when I already feel so unstable.
You feel so unstable, so you are constantly worried about losing your rental. Oh my
But
goodness.
You know that with the new rental prices, we potentially couldn't afford that. We've looked at moving, out of town to somewhere
Right.
less expensive, but that also means leaving all your family, right?
Yeah. And we've heard about people, doing just that, right? And so you've weighed things out, and this decision around having kids is affected by that?
We do, for
Yeah.
sure. And I know a lot of my friends, are in that same age range where our doctors are reminding us, oh, you better start trying. But when you already feel so tight on your finances and the housing especially, there's nothing, I'm still privileged enough to not deal with homelessness, but that's always in the back of my head, like your previous speaker spoke about, right? And that would just be another layer. At least right now, I only have to take care of myself. But what would I do if I had to take care of my baby?
Wow, yeah. That's a tough situation. And so what are you waiting for some of these government plans that come that promise to build more housing targeted to a diverse needs and diverse incomes as we heard?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to grow up in a low-income housing unit. My mom was a single mom, and this not great housing. And now I would be so lucky to have that housing if it was available to me.
Wow. And Anna, I'm sorry, I think we lost you there for a moment, but I really appreciate hearing from you. And wow, that precarity, right, that we've heard about when you are a renter in BC.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. All the best to you. Okay.
Thank you.
That's Anna in Cloverdale. And just as you were talking about life transitions that often come with a change in the housing situation, here's someone who's holding off, waiting for more supply, and that the kind of housing she grew up with when she was a child.
Absolutely, and I think we heard something there too that I heard a lot when I was writing my book, which was back in 2016, right?
Right.
That was about, at the time, people feeling like they'd done everything right,
Right.
and yet they were being held up by housing. And what they expected from doing everything right should be that, yes, I'm going to get this housing, I'm going to be able to feel like I could move into having a family and feel comfortable doing that. And our housing market is just not making that possible.
And wondering as well if she had to move out of the current rental, what that would mean in terms of a hike in what she has to pay, because then it would be a different market, or the market rate for whatever unit she would want to move in or apply to move in anyway. Thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate this context from you. Nathan Loster is my guest, a professor of sociology at UBC and author of the book, as he mentioned, The Death and Life of the Single Family House, Lessons from Vancouver on Building a Livable City. We'll take more of your calls as we ask, how is the housing crisis affecting young families in BC? This is our look at the challenges of raising young families in British Columbia this week. All week long, we're going to delve into various issues issues. We're calling it Baby Bumps and Road Humps. Would love to hear from you on the open line. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. It's 12:30 now and time for a CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The trial is underway for a BC man accused of killing his girlfriend more than 7 years ago. Derek Favell is charged with second-degree murder in the death of Ashley Simpson. The 32-year-old was last seen in the Salmon Arm area in 2016. Her remains were found 5 years later in a wooded area outside the community. Favell has pleaded not guilty. A group of more than 30 retailers, including London Drugs, Lululemon, and Save On Foods, wants a coordinated government response to fight what they say is a spreading crime wave caused by repeat shoplifters. The group has formed the Save Our Streets Coalition and says immediate action is critical to ensure staff and customer safety. And police say a 46-year-old Burnaby woman is recovering after being critically injured when she was hit by a vehicle that crashed through the wall of a Richmond restaurant on Friday. The driver of the car was not hurt. RCMP now say alcohol and drugs were not factors. And now the forecast on the north coast. A mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 7. Highs reaching 5 with some sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, mainly sunny with a high of 5 as well. Highs from -1 to +5 with lots of sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny with a high of 7. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon with highs around 12 degrees. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Gotta love those fall colors.
Fall colors.
Oh, they're beautiful. It was such a gorgeous weekend. I don't know if
It
you got
sure
it.
was. Yes, I did. Played some tennis. Ran into Glory Makarenko down at Kitts Beach.
Did you?
What a treat.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes.
I never run into Gloria or anyone from work.
Well, you got to get to Kitts Beach.
I think I gotta get to Kitts Beach.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing wrong. But in any case,
It was beautiful. Yes,
stunning
fantastic.
this weekend and all day today too. Rob, thanks so much.
You bet.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming too on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for CBC Vancouver. And yes, all week long, we are delving into the challenges faced by young people in British Columbia. And today, we're focusing on the issue of housing and asking you, how is the housing crisis affecting young families? And have you found a home you can afford? Tell us about that situation. What's your experience? And what are the solutions, do you think? Have you made decisions, like perhaps holding off and waiting to start a family due to those high housing costs, as we heard from our last caller in our last half hour? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Nathan Loster, Associate Professor of Sociology at UBC and author of the book, The Death and Life of the Single Family Home, Lessons from Vancouver on Building a Livable City. And we do have some emails coming in now too. Kirsten is writing from Victoria. We are a young family and lucky to have a home in the very expensive city of Victoria. To afford our home, we needed to have a rental suite built in. There needs to be a relaxation of the rules for creating a legal suite in older homes. How else can people afford these giant mortgages and keep their families safe? Okay, so getting to some of the measures that the province has brought in, this is, she's built a rental suite, and I believe the province is trying to make it easier for secondary suites to be built in homes. Is that right?
That's my understanding as well, that they're working on different ways of making this easier. And this is a huge portion of our rental stock in BC.
Right, yes.
So absolutely, it's something that, obviously she's writing on behalf of owners who are feeling like they need this in order to pay their mortgages. But it's also a huge amount of housing for the people who are in the tight situations of renters who are really looking for places to live.
Yeah, and when it comes to those secondary suites and homes, those are what will be permitted under the new short-term rental rules as well, and that's not what our emailer Kirsten is doing. It looks like it's a long-term rental suite, but that is what the province has announced as well to try and target long-term rentals. Stephanie writes from Kelowna. My husband and I are lucky enough to own our home in Kelowna. We are a young family with 2 boys. We're a one-income family as I am a stay-at-home mom. However, we were unable to afford the purchase of our home on our own. We bought it with my brother and his wife. Together, we lived in an 1,800 square foot home with 4 adults and 4 young boys. It was tight quarters. Over the years, together, we were both able to save money and have since purchased their half of the property, and now we own the entire home ourselves. I've heard of this, right? More people, the multi-generational families have done the same, but in the past, but people buying homes together.
Yeah, no, people are being really creative, I think,
Yeah.
in how they're trying to deal with the difficulty.
As you say, adapting, right? And one more email here from Graham in Vancouver. The only reason we were able to raise our family in Vancouver is because we had the good fortune to find space in a housing co-op after abandoning our leaky condo. Co-ops aren't some lottery win for residents. They were founded well in advance of the post-Expo superheated housing market. Vancouver needs to protect its existing inventory by renewing leases at reasonable rates, as well as supporting the development of new co-ops. Thank you very much for that email, Graham. Good to hear from you. bctoday@cbc.ca. And our numbers again on the open line, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, as we ask you, how has the housing crisis affected young families in BC? And Stephanie is up next now in Vancouver. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in. And so what's your experience?
I'm an elder millennial. Unfortunately, even though, like your last caller, my husband and I, quote unquote, did everything right, went to school, got good jobs, all this kind of stuff, we're still renting. You know, as much as we've tried to save up, our savings have not kept up with the price increase. You know, like we now have the down payment we needed about 10 years ago.
Right. Right.
Which is incredibly frustrating. But one thing I wanted to bring up that I don't think enough people are thinking about is the impact that this kind of housing crisis has on our essential services.
Right.
I work in emergency services, and we are chronically understaffed. And a big part of that is that people want to serve their communities in these vital ways, but they can't afford to live in the communities that they serve.
Yeah.
You know, I've got coworkers who are highly trained emergency service workers who are looking to move elsewhere in Canada because they cannot make ends meet here.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we end up with the situation that only the ultra rich can live here, well, if you need an ambulance, doesn't matter if you're ultra rich or not, you need that ambulance. And if there's no paramedic to come and help you, what are you going to do?
Right.
You know, if there's no nurses working in the emergency room, what are you going to do? And, you know, I don't know. Like the solution is twofold. Number one, we need to pay our emergency service workers more. But number two, we need to do something drastic so that the people that serve the community can live in the community that they serve.
I've heard that so often, right? That risk of the drain of those workers, the frontline workers especially. What about you, Stephanie? Do you see a future in Vancouver?
My husband and I have talked about moving out of the city. Right now we're tied here. My husband runs a company, and I do my work here, and our family's here. And, you know, our parents aren't getting any younger. And so the idea of moving, you know, hours away, that scares me, to not be close by if my parents needed care.
Right.
You know, and that's another piece of the problem, right? It's not just caring for young families. It's also those of us with aging parents that want to be nearby to care for them.
Absolutely. What a great point. Really good to hear from you, Stephanie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. The sandwich generation. It sounds like she's more concerned about her parents who live close by. But what about that? You know, has there been a clear vision of what the implications are when you have younger people, elder millennials, as she said, who decide to pick up and leave, and they work in these essential services.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I mean, it's a problem that we, to some extent, expect in places like Whistler, right, where it's a resort community. But it seems to be hitting home here in places like Vancouver, which we want to actually be a working city able to accommodate.
Right. But don't
all
we
the
expect
people
the
who
same
work
thing
here.
for Whistler? Shouldn't they also have paramedics?
Oh, they absolutely should,
Yeah.
but we expect there to be a problem where the people that they're servicing through as a tourist resort community, and they are sort of organized separately in terms of differently from other municipalities, that they would have this problem and that they would be geared, and they have tried different solutions to trying to tinker with regulations to create this kind of housing and create a lot more non-market housing. But we haven't seen that same efforts really driving new housing production that we need here in Vancouver.
You raise an interesting point in that are the solutions different depending on the municipality, depending on where we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think they absolutely can be, right? So different municipalities do face different situations. And also, we don't want to separate out municipalities from the broader metropolitan region. So often we expect one municipality to pick up and deal with different issues when in fact it's the region as a whole that is producing a problem that then trickles down into each of these municipalities.
Into their neighboring municipalities. So what do you make of the provinces, singling out the first 10 municipalities and saying you have these targets now in terms of building housing and speeding them up? You need to meet them, otherwise we will find ways to intervene. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure yet in terms of, I'm hoping it'll help work. If you believe, as I do, that municipalities have been gatekeepers keeping a lot of the housing that we need from being constructed, then this is an important part of measures we need to take to really get municipalities to come around and build that housing.
Right. Through delays in permits and things like that, and through approvals? Is that
permits, approvals, and general zoning regulations that still prevent so much housing from being constructed in the places where people want to live.
Okay. Let's take another call here. Michael is on the line from Vancouver. Hi, Michael.
Oh, hi there. How are you?
I am well. Thanks so much for calling in. And what comment did you want to make?
Well, I think not to make light, obviously, of anyone's anxiety, but this is a construct in the sense that it's been a privilege to own a single family home in the past, and that ship has sailed. I think everyone is now ready to acknowledge that Vancouver's a world-class city, and when you look around at the other world-class cities, whether it's Berlin, New York, Hong Kong, Paris, I mean, most people rent in Europe, rent for the rest of their life, their whole life, and manage to raise a family and enjoy life. And those that do own, maybe it's 500 square feet, maybe it's 600 square feet. I think if you were to ask, I mean, to draw a ridiculous analogy, but to bring in, the Gaza war, like, I mean, people there in Gaza, for example, managed to have 3.5 children per woman. And so this, what I'm trying to say is it's all how you approach it. It's all mental.
This culture of you have to have a single family home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or even own a home.
Right.
I mean, it might be getting antiquated, or at least for cities like Vancouver. Like I said, I'm not sure people in Berlin or London, the rental population is huge and it manages to get on with life.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. What happens when rent is also challenging, as we see here?
Well, again, I mean, I'm not sure that in most parts of the world, underdeveloped nations or expensive places like Hong Kong, where you just make do. You either rent with extended family or you own with extended family. You might not have a living room and a kitchen. You might not have a den where you have there's a lot of people getting by in life, living fulfilling, happy lives in a 1 or a 2-bedroom apartment that they either rent or own.
That's a really interesting point. And looking at perspective, right? And what needs to change perhaps in our culture. I mean, our guest here is talking about the death and life of the single family home. And on what that means. We've seen the city of Vancouver and the province now as well looking at places to rezone where you can use single family home lots and build multi units there in an effort to provide more housing. And perhaps that will require that shift in perspective, right, Michael?
Well, that's it. And I think this is a transition generation. If, again, I can go back to an example of, let's say, a European world-class city, they must have gone through this transition from a single-family home to something a little less, 200 years ago or 300 years ago. There must have been the angst of that transitional generation that went from, hey, I have memories of a backyard, therefore I deserve a backyard.
Right.
But once that transition's been made, I'm not so sure that, let's say, my grandchildren are going to be fretting about the fact that they don't own a house and that they have to live on the 20th floor in an apartment building.
Right. Michael, thank you very much for that call. Really thought-provoking point that you make. And I guess if you're thinking about backyards, this is why there are, urban planners would say you'll need park space and green space around any kind of densification.
Yes, I think that is correct, although it's interesting, right? I mean, the sort of broader history of Vancouver is such that most of our parks are actually in the places where there's also houses with yards, because that was required by planners who had this idea of who they were planning for and was a particular middle class. And coming back to Europe, it's fascinating, actually, right? So the European experience is quite diverse in and of itself, right? There are places where people predominantly rent and places where they predominantly own. And there was a recent study by a colleague of mine that was looking at, trying to figure out like how does this affect fertility rates differently? So how people can have children and what can support them. And it turns out if you close down options to rent, so people are predominantly owning, and then you close down financing to be able to buy a home, you get no kids, right? So you close down both the paths that people might exactly, right? That people might set up their own households and get kids.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I think we're facing now. So we might have been able to talk about the single-family house back again when I wrote the book 7 years ago, but now I think people are just experiencing crisis in so many different ways.
So many fronts after 10 increases in interest rates over the last year or so. Thank you so much for that call, Michael. Cody is up next now in Kelowna. Hi, Cody. Hi there, Cody.
Oh, hi there, guys.
Hi, thanks so much for calling. And what is the impact of the housing crisis on young families in BC? What do you want to say?
Thank you. I guess I was just wanting to talk about, the depth of single-family residences for sure. I apologize, I haven't read the book, so I don't know too much about what he's written here. You're a professional, but I guess my concern is just more the mental health and quality of life of families of 4 or 5 that are being pushed into 1 and 2 bedroom condos in Kelowna here like crazy. We're ripping down single family residential areas and building up these 1 bedroom condos and expecting families to live in them. I remember fondly, growing up in my backyard with the dirt between my feet, climbing the trees. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that here in Kelowna for my family, but,
What was it like for you then, raising your kids?
Not too bad, but again, I got in early, right? 15 years ago, I still got in, so it wasn't too bad, but, we're not struggling super crazy. But I am very concerned about my children and others that are, not just my children, but everyone that's growing up in Kelowna nowadays. Like I said, as we're tearing down all the single-family residentials that seem to be perfectly good houses.
Yeah, it's
at the expense of, I'm not really too sure why we're tearing them down.
And it's such an interesting point you raise about the quality of life and the mental health. People have that, right? It's nostalgic, that image and those memories of playing in the backyard. If you had a white picket fence, the dream. Do you think that needs to change relative to what we're going through now?
I don't think it needs to change at all. No, I don't see a problem with that at all. I'm not too sure exactly what the big problem is. I understand that we have a growing population and that we need more houses and all that stuff. I get all that, but what I'm not seeing the benefit in Kelowna like what everyone's talking about
Of densification.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, Cody, good to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care. There you have it, right? The perceptions, how we perceive what makes a home. From your research, what do families want? I suppose that's not uniform. What kind of home are families looking for?
I have to say, it's one thing as a sociologist that I want to make sure we get across is that it's not uniform.
No.
Right? There really is diversity, and for so long, this is part of the broader critique. Is that for so long, all we were planning for people in terms of families in particular was single-family houses. So it's actually great to see a greater diversity coming online. And you do see a lot of families who actually don't want the single-family house. And then you see a lot more families who want it but can't afford it, but they're willing to do something different and try it.
Right.
And to some extent, a lot of this comes back to some of the issues that we've been raising already, right? The affordability crisis being forefront, but there are many others, right? The greenhouse gas crisis.
I was going to say, is it due to climate change? Yeah.
Yeah, climate change, environmental impact, all kinds of reasons that we're now looking for alternatives to the single-family house, and that has everything to do with all the really lengthy commutes and the sprawl that it might force you into if you use that as your only mode of living.
Right, but to Cody's point, the mental health aspect of that, how can you build how can you densify smartly so that, as you say, a lot of the parks in Vancouver are in neighborhoods where they already have backyards. So how can we ensure that when we plan these neighborhoods, that there is an intentionality there, that you are building a life, you're helping people live good qualities of life?
It's a great question, and I think there's a lot of different attempts to try and figure out how to do that, and how to then also balance that with things like affordability, which is what we're struggling with most heavily at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kelowna is actually a really interesting place to see that, and obviously Cody disagrees with it, but it's a place where they've really been putting in place what are pretty exciting multiplex options that the province itself is also interested in pursuing more broadly.
One thing, you're a sociologist, I'm an open line host, also not uniform by any means. All opinions from across the spectrum for sure. Ben is calling us now from Fort St. John. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Thanks for calling. What's your experience?
Well, my experience in my family, I've got a niece and a nephew that are presently living at home. They're university educated. They're in their late 20s. They're a little bit I wouldn't say underemployed in their field. They're doing what they're trained to do, but, they're not making the money of somebody who's got 20 or 30 years experience. Right?
Okay.
So I mean, they got student loans to pay, and they have to live at home as a result. They don't have large social networks where they got like 3 or 4 buddies that they can move into or anything like that, or friends that they can move in with.
Right.
So
they're living with their parents then?
They're living with their parents,
Yeah.
and I know that's not an exceptional case.
Right.
It's happening all over the place.
Yeah.
And
Nathan is shaking his head,
cases,
yeah.
And actually, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of kids that are moving back home with 1 or 2 kids as well. And that really changes the family dynamic.
Sure. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that then? And their situation, do they seem pretty satisfied, or are they?
Actually, the families always got along. The point I made there to your producer before I got on air was, it's a tight-knit family. Everybody gets along. Both families get along. But what about a situation where, the son it's been a bit of a rough ride with the son, or the daughter, and, they don't get along with the parents,
right.
But there really aren't any other options except for living with your mom and dad. So all of a sudden you've got, some acrimony or drama in the house because of unresolved conflict, so to speak.
Yeah. Ben, thank you very much. Great point to bring into this. Thanks for the call. Again, adapting. I have about 30 seconds left, Nathan, but any final thoughts from you on where this should go next?
I think, I've got way too many thoughts as a housing researcher. But I think just to the last caller's point, I think that's absolutely another side, right? That we've got a lot of people who really are delaying leaving home. And that's another huge part of our current housing crisis, is that people just feel like they can't find any place to move into.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
it may work
absolutely
out for some and not so much for others.
Absolutely.
A real pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nathan Loster is Associate Professor of Sociology at UBC, author of The Death and Life of the Single Family House, Lessons from Vancouver on Building a Livable City. And stay tuned. All week long, we are going to delve into the challenges faced by young families in BC. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what new parents need. And finally, this hour, we are remembering Matthew Perry.
Look, for the first time in my life, I'm in a real relationship, okay? I'm not going to screw that up by, telling the truth.
Now, the actor was raised in Ottawa. Of course, is best known for his role as Chandler Bing in Friends. He was found dead on Saturday, aged 54. Perry was open about his struggles with addiction, both in his memoir and in an interview last year on CBC Radio's Q. He spoke to host Tom Power about his desire to help other addicts.
What does helping other people give you in your own journey then?
It is, I can't describe it. It's something spiritual. It fills your heart. You see the lights coming on for a new person who didn't understand. That guy didn't have the guy who said, it's not your fault. I said that to him. And then I saw this look of, this look of relief that it wasn't his fault. And we started talking in a completely different way. And I get as much help from talking to 600 people as I do to one person. It gives me the juice, the same amount. The best thing about me, bar none, is if somebody comes up to me and says, I can't stop drinking, can you help me? I can say yes and follow up and do it. That's the best thing. And I've said this for a long time. When I die, I don't want friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want that to be the first thing that's mentioned. And I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that.
That's Matthew Perry speaking in front of a live audience on CBC Radio's Q last year. You can search for that full interview on cbcradio.ca. And that is it for our show today. My thanks to everyone who called in and joined our discussion. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca, listen again on the CBC Listen app, or watch us on demand on CBC Vancouver's YouTube page. And join us tomorrow for more of Baby Bumps and Road Humps, our look at challenges for young families in BC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for watching.
Told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke. Your love life's the away. It's like you're